Everybody here. We thank you for coming to this presentation of the findings and of the decision of the People's Tribunal. As you know, and according to the procedure, we had 2 days of public hearings where we had the opportunity of listening to, on one side, witnesses, on the other side, to expert reports, and we had the opportunity of inquiring and questioning extensively to go in depth into the understanding and possibly qualification of the facts, the purpose, the main purpose of the tribunal, to assess the degree of, as far as possible, obviously, of consistency and of the documentation which was behind the facts. We had the opportunity also to assess various reports which were presented to the tribunal in written form, prepared by experts, not only experts we met during the tribunal, but also reports which have been available mainly over the last year and a half, because the situation here in Cambodia in general and with the garment industry more specifically, and the questions around the right of the garment workers and of the Cambodian Society for Freedom of Expression Association have been the object of many investigation. And based on all these things, we have taken our decision, which will be now briefly illustrated. We will have then the time for questioning. You know that the composition of the tribunal, as you have seen, is a composition which is partly international. We are coming from Arod, myself and my colleague Gill from Australia, and then we have 3 Cambodian members who will be obviously even more specific in the answer and the discussion. Each one on his or her own capacity and competence to answer some of the questions which have to do more specifically with the question in Cambodia. My role here is not, obviously, it's not our role just to go through a formal reading of all the text of our decision. Is a text which is not long, but would be a bit boring, and in any case is not a text which is meant for being reading like a verdict which set things in a fairly definite manner. We will present the main finding after some notes on the methodology. The idea of the tribunal, it was said already in the beginning, is not, principally because it is not the role of the tribunal to pronounce verdicts of condemnation, punishment, because we do not have neither the role nor the power, but the People's Tribunal is meant to give voice specifically to those who are requesting an attention, because they don't feel to have enough space and possibility to make their voice and their reasons heard, and even less they have the idea that what they are suffering could be taken into account for a change in the situation. The victims, as they are called in many instances in the People's Tribunal dictionary or vocabulary, are not simply those who are suffering. They are looking for redressal of their situation. They are not so much interested in a condemnation in themselves or assurance or responsibility, but in looking for a different future. So the people's rights are looking for the establishment or the redressing of people's rights, not simply to the condemnation of those who are violating people's rights. So the focus of the tribunal has been obviously mainly in the listening to the victims here, and in this case, as in the petition, the garment workers in the industry in Cambodia specifically, as also representative of a regional situation, because you know that this tribunal is part of a broader campaign which is very consistent across different countries. We had tribunal in Sri Lanka, there are other tribunal planned. So we focused first and mainly the attention to the listening of the victims. As it is obviously the case, the hearings could not extend to numbers. We had the opportunity of having the testimonies of 4 persons who were, however, we felt, based also on the overall evaluation, very well representative of what is the situation, or we have documented is the situation in the garment industry. And we could say, and that will be even better qualified by my colleague Gill in reading the legal aspect of that, that the situation of the workers is really coinciding with what in general terms is called a non-dignity situation, in the sense that it's a situation where the human dignity is in fact denied, systematically violated, and that accounts for a clear violation of the fundamental human right. It's not simply a situation where there are some violations of the right of labor, which are part of the trade union controversy. It's a way of considering human beings as mere part of a production chain, which is called technically the supply chain for the garment industry, but it's really a situation where human beings are used, and every time a human being is used as a variable which is dependent on the production of goods, there is a violation of his or her, and in this case her specifically, dignity as a human being. We are in this sense facing something which is the substance of any civil society, and I think that possibly here the situation is very well known and should not be repeated, but I think that what we have heard and what we have seen in depth is really something which merits some reminder. I think that the situation is really invading the life of people throughout. All these workers, most of them, as you know, are women, young women in reproductive age, so they are those also who are recognized officially by the society to be those who should take care of the future, and those are those who are in fact really violated in their freedom of making a choice for the future, even for reproductive life and for the life of their children. Beside that, you know that it's not simply a general declaration, but women are forced to base their nutrition on food. I read in order to just go back to the text, with a totally insufficient caloric content, and that's all these components are in fact constituent of a violation of human rights. If you go back and you will listen to that, what are the constituted elements of human rights is not simply a concept, is made up of the concrete access to what allows to have a normal, we could call, life. So a life where in fact you have the possibility of being human, not simply to try to survive with all the difficulty. Then the situation is characterized by the many hours of overtime work, because it is practically mandatory to have this overtime work in order to have some support for the very low salary. Then the fact of the transportation, the housing, which is appalling from the point of view of what should be considered today a situation of working women. And therefore, in that context, the low wages, which is one of the key issues which are faced by the Tribunal, because for looking forward and for redressing, one of the way out for this situation of violation, which is really common to so many people, is to see whether something could be done in order not to oblige to suffer on the top of what they are already suffering for the working condition. Then we have examined, based on that, and for the situation of, and that's again intolerable job insecurity, in the sense that the imposition, even if it's a legal imposition, but it's an imposition of the legislation of the fixed duration contracts, introduce a further criteria for instability, for anxiety, and for the fact of being dismissed for very different reasons. That is true in all the parts of the world. We know if you do not have a very well-defined labor contract, and then you are at disposal, in fact, of the factory owners, and anything could be advocated to suspend this contract. And this is obviously even more important for the wage, because there is very little chance, if any, to grow for seniority bonus. You can be dismissed because of you are pregnant, or you have to care for children, because you are sick, because you can't rely. So you are in fact an object which could be disposed as it occurs for the interest of those who are specifically concerned with the production of these things. The data which have been presented to document the impact also of this part of the contracts, which is the fixed dose contract, is also very important, because it is also a violation of the possibility of freedom of expression, of association, because we have been presented with data showing how trade unions, or unions who are representing workers in any case, are in fact very constrained or restricted in their capacity, and they are repressed with long-term consequences. The numbers we have heard of people kept in prison or kept under custody for long period of time with no practically capacity of real defense, are again really amazing. The tribunal has then considered looking for, as I said, for forward solution, how and why the claim of those who have proposed the tribunal, the Asian Floor Wage Association campaign, which is represented here by the Asian Floor Wage Cambodia, who have provided, I must acknowledge, amazingly well organized context for the works which have been done, because everything was very well documented. Documents were accessible, everything was really in due order, so that tribunal had the possibility of working in full, not only freedom, but in a well-organized and highly supported atmosphere. So I say, because of the general framework of the perspective of the Asia Floor campaign, we have extensively heard and questioned those who were proposing the living wage paradigm as one of the ways out, the possible way out. Obviously, and I may say that once forever, we are not commenting specifically, because that was not the specific Data Tribunal. We mentioned very, very briefly, simply to say we are fully aware that we are talking in a country where the problems are many. Problems which are institutional problem, because the problem is not simply of freedom of expression against or for government workers. The problem of poverty is not only for workers, just the opposite. If you see the data from rural versus urban situation is very clear, and the statistics about the situation of Cambodia are clear in showing that the problems are big, because Cambodia is very, very low in the list of so-called developed countries from the point of view of human rights and indicator of human development. So the problems are big, but we felt that garment industry, as it said, as it represented also up to 80% of the total export of Cambodia, and so it's a really resource for Cambodia, could and is in fact a kind of model situation where solutions could be and should be with priority tested in order to see whether something could happen in terms of providing better solution for human rights. So the living wage has been presented as one, say, conceptual and technical tool which could be and possibly obviously should be implemented in the intention of those who are proposing it, and there's a big platform as a way living out. Why the living wage? I think that you can have a closer look to the definitions which I said, and something certainly will be specifically discussed, because the contribution of the tribunal has been specifically possibly to link the living wage concept not simply to a contractual problem, which is certainly a contractual problem, but to link to the word living to the fact that wage is not simply the product of a contract. The wage is one of the expression of the possibility of really enjoy basic human rights. So the link is also with the general principles which are defending and promoting human rights in the national and international legislation on document. So the living wage has been seen as really as a crossroad of what is needed in order to give an answer which will not be a once forever answer, but which could give the idea of an answer where the workers could start being human being, and therefore to get more organized, to propose to be participatory. Living wage is not simply a battle around the 61 versus 66 with the $5 which are being granted by from the top, or whether you are looking for that. The Tribunal has been confronted with many estimations of the amount of living wages, and some estimation, the more reliable, go to see that it would be obvious from the point of view of simply technical and feasibility consideration, nothing else, to have at least a minimum living wage of 120 or whatever salary, knowing that all these purely technical calculations are also dependent on inflations and the evolution of society, and in an economic crisis everything could be moving. So it's not a problem of, the Tribunal says, of considering the level of the salary the core of the battle, but what is behind this level of salary, what is the space of freedom and rights which could open to the real people of one country, because the specific condition of the country are those who are in fact important in this situation. I think I spoke already enough from the point of view of what has been the approach given by the Tribunal. We have the time to go into detail, but I think that now I would like to ask my international so-called colleague. The idea is just to have first the word on that sense, to say his position on the so-called legal, but say the point of view of the rights with respect to that, and then we could have a common reading of what have been the decision of the Tribunal.
Thank you, Gianni. I'd first like to say that I'm honored to be here in Cambodia and sitting on this so important tribunal. And I would like to thank all of those people who have been so generous to us and so helpful in trying to discover the reality of what happens here in the garment industry, but also more generally, because the industry, of course, has to be seen in its total context. If you, I'm sorry, there are no numbers on the pages, but if you count in 4 pages to page 8 of the report, if you have it, you will see that we have a section on human rights, the living wage, and working conditions, the legal context. Well, I would like to speak about the legal context, and I was, in writing up my part of the report, I was really struck by the excellent provisions in the Cambodian constitution and the labor law. But and I put the international standards secondarily. I'm sure people here are familiar with the Constitution and the labor law, so I want to go actually directly to the international standards, because it's not only perhaps less familiar to you, but it is important that these international standards be recognized. The garment industry is, of course, an international industry, and there, without being too bold or indeed arrogant about this, I guess we could say that in some sense the eyes of the world are on this room. If you were onto the internet, you could find stories about this tribunal in many newspapers, many websites, etc. Social networking, of course, has passed the word around. So if the conditions of workers and people generally in Cambodia are to be improved. We need that international attention. We need the things that people do in the dark and at night, and indeed in every factory every day. We need these to be exposed. So one of the ways of doing that is to contrast the reality in the factories with the international norms, and also, of course, your own norms. So let me just mention the basic idea that we had when we looked at the legal context. This is an inquiry into a living wage. We were asked to determine whether we thought that it was possible to say that a living wage was actually a human right, and therefore could be seen as a part of the suite of norms which are intended to guarantee human rights across the world. And we must say that another part of the inquiry was into decent work, into working conditions. Are they decent? Now, these two things are, of course, connected, and we'll talk about that as we develop the discussion and the conversation with you. Our view of the law on this is that it is possible under existing norms, international and Cambodian, to say that a living wage is a human right. In fact, although it has never been specifically and expressly called a human right, as you will see when I speak about some of the international and Cambodian legal norms, we can see that it's implied. Because without a living wage, you cannot enjoy most and perhaps all of those rights which have been expressed. So we hope that from this tribunal and other tribunals that have gone before and which will come later, we can finally get the international community to recognize that a living wage is simply the basis for human dignity. Now, I've mentioned human dignity, and Gianni talked about this as well. This is the key concept. If you cannot exercise your political, civil, economic and social rights, those that are guaranteed to you, the things you would like to do in your life, if you cannot exercise those, then we argue, and I think it's clear, that you are being denied those rights which are supposed to be guaranteed. And let me say, I came a bit early to Cambodia, a couple of days early, before the tribunal commenced hearings, and I was able to visit several industrial parks and to see the living conditions, the rented rooms in which workers spend that little time they have after they finish work. So this is not simply a case of some foreigner coming here and talking about law and what should be the case. I actually saw a small part, admittedly, but I think a representative part of the working conditions and the situation of workers. Unfortunately, I wasn't actually able to get into a factory, but I did have a little bit of a look through some of the industrial fans which are supposed to provide adequate ventilation. And of course we discussed the specific conditions at the tribunal with 4 workers who were brave enough and generous enough to come along and tell us about their situation in those factories. All right. Now, with regard to human rights, the living wage and working conditions, the legal context, you will see there that in 4 small paragraphs I've more or less summarized what I've been saying here. So I won't read them, except to say that in the first paragraph we concluded that workers cannot enjoy the human rights they are guaranteed under both Cambodian and international standards if they are paid wages which do not fulfill their basic needs. If we look at the international standards, and I'll just do this briefly, the basic document, after the horrors of, in particular, of the what has come to be called the World War, the Second World War, in the early and mid, from 1939 to 1945. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was established and accepted and has been used and given great respect and some authority for the last 60 years or so. And in Article 23, Section 1, it says everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. Section 23.2 provides protection against discrimination. And Section 3 states, and this is particularly important for our purposes, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity. Now, in other articles of the Universal Declaration, it goes on to elaborate some of the elements that in a sense, reinforce that legal norm. The right to rest and leisure, the right to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being of himself or herself and the family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care. Now, I won't go on and read the rest of the articles in the Universal Declaration. You can read them and use them as you will, hopefully. I might say that there are other documents which have been developed and agreed to across the globe. International covenants on economic, social, and cultural rights, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And as I've explained in the paper, these two are important for our understanding of how workers should be treated by their employers. Now, so that's the international position, that there are general principles that, of course, can be applied to Cambodia and to the workers in the garment industry. But what I guess surprised me, because I didn't know that much about the legal framework here, what surprised me was that when I began to look at the specific provisions of the Constitution in Cambodia, it is a very progressive document. It includes, it accepts the international standard. Article 31, Part 1 of your Constitution. The Kingdom of Cambodia shall recognize and respect human rights as stipulated in the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the two covenants that I mentioned, and the ILO conventions related to human rights, women and children's rights. 32. Every citizen shall have the right to life, personal freedom, and security. Article 35, 1. Khmer citizens of either sex shall be given the right to participate actively in the political, economic, social, and cultural life of the nation. Article 38, Part 2. The law shall protect the life, honor, and dignity of the citizens. And in another article, which I'm struggling to find, but anyway, yes, and this is important, although the relevance is not exactly does not exactly leap off the page. Article 51, Part 1: the Kingdom of Cambodia adopts a policy of liberal democracy and pluralism. Now, if we put all of this together, as a lawyer has to do, we can see that the intention of the framers of your Constitution was to incorporate those international guarantees for workers into the life of Cambodia. What kind of a life? A life which, in theory at least, a liberal democracy provides. That is, the active participation of the citizens of this country, as they say, in the social, economic, political, and cultural life of that country. So, just thinking deductively, we have these rights. It's supposed to be a liberal democracy. Liberal democracy is supposed to allow you to participate fully as a human being with dignity in those different spheres: work, family, politics, culture, being creative, enjoying the marvelous physical environment that you have here, etc. So our conclusion from this is, and if we look at Article 104 of your labor law code, the conclusion must be that a living wage is guaranteed. Decent working conditions are guaranteed. Because in the labor law, it actually gathers up the notions from international law and from your Constitution. It's just a one-sentence article, but it says that Cambodian workers are entitled to conditions and wages compatible with human dignity. So that's why I say human dignity, and Gianni certainly made that point, human dignity is the key here. How can you have human dignity if you cannot participate fully, freely, as you choose, with your health and with your children, who you may wish to raise? I mean, not everybody wants children. Some people think they have too many children. But if you should have the possibility of having a family, a healthy family, educated children, etc. Now, all the wages that are paid in the factories here, you cannot do that. On the conditions, the dangerous conditions that exist. We had someone testified to us that the labor inspectors could not get near the workers in a factory because of the haze of chemicals that were inside that factory. And of course, I suppose it never occurred to him that everybody there should have had protective masks. There should have been proper ventilation. And that was another issue, but one that we might want to talk about later. The problem is when you have law, what actually happens? Does that law get enforced? Is it recognized by the Labor Ministry, inspectors and others, by other institutions of the state? So we must remember here that we're talking in a sense about a very dynamic situation. The workers and their families, the NGOs who are most impressive in this country, the ministry, the Council of Ministers, the Prime Minister, and of course the factory owners, the GMAC, the Association of Manufacturers, and the buyers. I haven't really gone into the buyers or the brands as they're called, but I think you can understand from what I've said that our view is that the buyers are violating these norms, the norms of your country and the international norms, which are universally recognized. Thank you.
Thanks. While we agreed with our Cambodian colleagues, they will go in more detail and comments on the recommendations. I think that I would like simply to add, based on what you have heard, some points before reading the conclusion of the tribunal, which will be the starting for the discussion. I think that this situation as a whole, and it is important to use that opportunity to mention other points which have been investigated, is characterized in Cambodia specifically, and in garment industry in particular, by a very profound dissociation. On one side, everything is well known, everything is well legislated, and nothing happens. In the sense that the situation is such that it's a vicious circle where everybody knows nobody is responsible. There is a vast evidence of impunity which touches everybody because nobody is considered to be the main responsible. Now, in a complex situation like the organization of work, it is clear that there is never one responsible. The responsibility is the product of a really collective, planified discharge of responsibilities, so nobody could be, in fact, considered to be the only responsible. I think that is one of the problems which we are facing, and that the tribunal has said, because it's amazing what Professor Boehringer was saying. You have principles which are well known, which are repeated, which are taken as framework, and then there is such a obvious violation. The definition of living wage first, but then if you see each component of living wage. And we had the opportunity of considering that in discussing also, for instance, the case of mass fainting, which is so well known I cannot discuss. But overall, and even, and possibly more interestingly, in the testimony of one of the representatives of the buyer, the Puma Corporation, it was clear that the facts were there. Everybody was discussing about the explanation, the solution, while nobody, in fact, was clearly investigating. Now, the absence of investigation, especially in front of the repetition, is a clear violation and recognition that something is there. You are not taking the responsibility for looking for what should be your responsibility. It's interesting in that sense, really, that it's not as yet any official common document, and that the representative of Puma was present in the tribunal, evidence they have made an investigation. They have made an investigation where all the causes which could cause were very well listed, partially investigated. The data were and are apparently in the web as a descriptive account. No formal common investigation has been made with the other companies which are sharing, or could say that we are not in that situation. So people are there. They express their really resistance to the situation also by fainting. There are many data showing, and very consistent, we have formally examined, and you will see that in the tribunal, the mass fainting and how what is the opinion of the tribunal, but I was quoting that as really a case of this dissociation. One side, the evidence of the fact, then the evidence of what should be the respect of rights, the constitution, the legislation, and then the disregard, which is one way of not recognizing human dignity. So I think that it's useful now simply to refer, so that it's easy. On one side, what could be considered the introduction to the decision of the tribunal, or the conclusion, which is what has been put in the section for the legal qualification. I read in the legal context, the workers cannot enjoy, that is the summary of what has been said, the human rights they are guaranteed under national and international standards if they are paid wages which do not fulfill their basic needs. We accept that workers must therefore be paid a living wage. Further, we accept the position put forward by the Asian floor wage coalition. A living wage is a human right. It is implied in the other human rights. It should now be accepted expressly as a human right. Evidence presented to the tribunal is clear and overwhelming. Cambodian garment workers are not paid a living wage. We are persuaded that the failure to pay a living wage violates both national and international standards. And according to our formula, saying that the tribunal, based on the findings and considerations he has been exposed to, concludes: first, the situation of workers in the Cambodian garment supply chain present severe deficits which correspond to a systematic violation of their fundamental right to a decent human life. Here again, I would like to understand, to make clear, when we declare the responsible for the chain supply, simply for the fact that the responsible are many different, and it is clear that we are not pointing to one in preference of the other. That should be formally investigated in cases needed. Point 2, the living wage concept and concrete propositions are as set forth in the present report and spelled out in their specific constituents already in the report of the Sri Lanka People's Tribunal. The living wage must include at least what is adequate to sustain a family: an 8-hour day, a sufficient caloric intake for a working adult, the capacity of assuring basic educational and health needs for the children. As a human right, this must be enforced in Cambodia. Also, as a powerful instrument to contribute to the overall compliance of the Cambodian governing institution, as well as of those who have decisional responsibility in the garment industry supply chain, with the principles and set out in the Cambodian constitution and labor law. Third, because of its comprehensiveness and urgency, the implementation of the living wage concept cannot be postponed to wait for unequivocal and rigid definitions. It must be concretely experimented in the real context of work and life in Cambodia and at the regional level. Because of its central relevance, it is recommended that the garment industry supply chain could be considered an urgent priority. Fourth, all the public and private actors who have been identified in this report as having decisional roles must be considered directly responsible and accountable for the commission of violation of human rights as described and qualified in this report, especially in view of the impunity they have benefited from, as well as for any delay and on refusal to redress such violations. Fifth, it is not in the power, and it is even less the role of a people tribunal to pronounce legal verdicts of condemnation or punishment, but by exposing, giving voice, qualifying the hows and whys of the violations of the rights of the garment workers, our aim is to provide knowledge and reasons which could be instrumental in helping their efforts and struggles to have their rights fully recognized. Those are the conclusions of the tribunal. We have then set out various recommendations, and I think that our colleagues will share that.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for all your attention. I asked to speak English so that it's be consistent, and because the type in front of me is in English, because if I try to translate, it might be different from the translation provided to you. That's why I asked the permission to read the recommendation parts in English as well. But before I read this, first, I would like to stress again, as we mentioned in the beginning of our opinion paper, is that this is a non-binding opinion, and our recommendation is for your consideration. It's not any a kind of like judicial authority, but it's worth for consideration after we having heard your argument, and after we explaining you the finding of the legal framework for the living wage in Cambodia, as well as the general conclusion that has been read out to you by the Chief Justice, Dr. Gianni. So now let me proceed with the recommendation parts. We divided our recommendation based on the actor. Therefore, some of the recommendation you will hear like quite repetitive, but it is very helpful. We consider that we divide our recommendation in that style. So please understand this if you feel it's quite competitive, quite repetitive. So as always, of course, we already said not only the state that is responsible for the human rights, but all other actors. But of course, the state is the key actor. That's why we first talk about what the royal government of Cambodia should do in order to address this situation. And in the first part, as I read, is related to mostly the royal government of Cambodia, although you will see that it's also involved international community. So the first point that we would like to recommend is that further developments of both the international and national legal frameworks to clearly specify the right to a minimum living wage. In that standard, it should include precise standard and methods of wage calculation. And we also provide all detail for this point, as I would not read it out all, and I hope you can read all the detail about our recommendation related to what should be taken into account in developing this rise to minimum living wage standard and method. Let me proceed with the second point. As the short-term contract, the fixed duration contract has been the big issue for the controversial argument, and we could not achieve any authoritative interpretation or decision. We recommend that to effectively address the debates on the use of short-term contract, particularly the provision of the labor law regarding the fixed duration contracts require clarification. In this, measures should be undertaken by the royal government of Cambodia in order to amend the Article 73 of the labor law to indicate whether fixed duration contract is permissible after 2 years of employment. They also should provide for situations such as temporary contract termination for a short period, for example less than 1 month, in order to ensure that benefits such as seniority may be retained. Next point is that the royal government of Cambodia should take urgent steps to ensure that trade unions are able to freely organize, represent workers, and bargain collectively with Cambodian suppliers without harassment, intimidation, or victimization. Another point is that the royal government of Cambodia should set up pilot project on housing for the most vulnerable workers, those who fall victims to facturation contract practice, as well as those discriminated against in lawful unionization activity. This should brought about in collaboration with ILO, Better Factory Cambodia, and other donors and NGOs. The next point, the government should launch comprehensive independent investigation into mass fainting or establish other mechanisms in order to establish firm foundation or determining the responsibility. To establish firm foundation for determining the responsibility for mass fainting, and also to have developed appropriate measures for prevention is needed in order to ensure the safety of garment workers and help repair the reputation of Cambodian garment industry in the perspective of the international community. Last point for the government of Cambodia is that the royal government of Cambodia should utilize the opportunity presented by the global garment industry that placing increasing importance and investment in suppliers from China and the Southeast Asia region. The royal government of Cambodia should advance the arguments for a living wage at a regional and national level through a collective approach with other governments in order to address the global supply chain which see real wage declining. In particular, Southeast Asian member states should be encouraged to discuss the establishment of a regional floor wage within the context of the ASEAN framework. Now let me proceed with the recommendation for trade unions and labor NGOs. First point, unions and federations should adopt a living wage concept as part of their bargaining strategy and as a political goal. Unions and federations need to increase the proportion of women's garment workers holding position within their leadership and representative roles. Unions and federations should be united in their effort to build their collective bargaining power, as well as their efforts to build confidence of employer and buyer with negotiating collective bargaining agreement. Also, union and federation should place greater emphasis on the importance of pressurizing buyers for decent labor standard and wage increase. They should appreciate the existence of the global supply chains in relation to the garment industry, which place not only the employer but also brands in a position to deal with the demand of a higher wage. Unions should work collaboratively but without corruption with employers and factory management to pressurize the buyers into sharing their profits. This will result in mutual benefits for both the employee and employer and improve both working conditions and productivity. Unions and federations need to be trained and equipped with necessary tools to preserve evidence of any abuse or violation of law, especially in case of pregnant female workers and union discrimination, so that it may be effectively used in adjudication and or arbitration process for collective dispute resolution. Unions and labor rights NGO and ILO should look for a way to provide low interest rate, such as microcredit scheme, and which is easily accessible for short-term loan in order to meet worker need. Unions should also adopt a system of worker representative of health and safety aspect, and the establishment of safety committee in all garment industry workplace. So let's now pause a little bit, and so we finished with the union and federation specifically. We move to the multinational corporation, the brands. The brand is mean the buyer, but not the consumer, as well as the international other international actor here. So the recommendation to this group of stakeholders, the brands and the international actor, are as follows. Mechanism for monitoring compliance as well as reviewing wage standards should be adequately funded for proactive operation in order to assist the activity of the Labour Advisory Council and the Royal Government of Cambodia in this aspect. They should move beyond good intention and recognize and prioritize the need for human rights in workplace in their pricing and procurement policy. Go beyond codes of conduct and other standards and commit to the application of a mandatory living wage at all levels and sectors of the supply chain. And lastly, our recommendation to the United Nations, other interested party and consumer. We ask that the United Nations make a visit to Cambodia to verify the compliance of the garment industry with the rights included in the respective area of competence. It should be assured at their earliest convenience by the UN Special Rapporteur on Business and Human Rights, Living Wage Rights, and also freedom of expression and the freedom of association. Second point, the ILO should adopt the living wage as a key element in its work to promote decent work and better factory, and prioritize the promotion of the living wage concept in the global supply chain of the garment industry and other low-wage industry. The third point, women's group should advocate locally, regionally, and internationally for better protections of the rights of women's workers in garment industry. They should lobby the UN Committee of CEDAW and the International Convention of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Consumers should support the global efforts of trade unions and other labor organizations and NGOs, such as Clean Clothes Campaign, to pressure multinational corporations, the brands, to adopt ethical rules and practice, as well as the living wage in their supply chain. Let me end my reading of the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, while our colleague will, Mrs. Vanny will take the word during the discussion, I think that Dr. Kek would like just to add some general comments to the work of the President.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my apology. I would like to speak in Khmer. Yeah, because I would like to reiterate that please do not confuse, especially the media. We are not real judges. We only act as judges, but we do not have any verdict or ruling to put pressure to anyone. It is only recommendations. If you want to consider, yes, you can. If you don't want, no one will punish you. Yeah, and my comment is very general. Is that Cambodia, is suffering, especially the workers, starting from the civil war Civil Khmer Rouge, and starting from the 23rd October 1991, the government promised to develop the country and restore, and the international community also promised to give aid to Cambodia. Half of the budget would go to the people. They help us a lot, but what have we developed? Not only just physical infrastructure. We need to consider human resources in Cambodia. In particular, as we are all aware that Cambodian economy, when we export, where it comes from? It comes from the workers in garment industry. This is very important. And second, from tourism, as we know. So we need to pay attention to those workers. All the issue which I have observed starting in the last 3 days. The real cause is from low wage, which cannot make them live in dignity. My colleague already mentioned that we need to ensure that people live with human dignity, and the government's law, the constitution's is very good. If we just implement those provisions in our national law, we would become a better country. And now I would like to emphasize that among the workers, we have 80% of them are women, and starting from 1992, the government is committed to enhance women's rights. As we know, that 81%, according to the UNDP research, are the workers from 15 to 64. They contribute actively to the economic growth, 81%, and the number of women, the number of women population is more than men, 52, comparing to 48% in the general public. Therefore, I believe that women is a very important force which need more attention. I mentioned we means we, all of us. Women spend time working, and 90% of the time of the women is on the family. Therefore, they have double burden, working and looking after the family. This is a research finding from an international NGO, and the finding also says that women spend 3.3 hours on the family, if compared to men only 0.3, not even half an hour. So women have a strong burden. So we are not demanding more. We are not demanding to become rich. We only demand a living wage to support themselves, to support the family, to get sufficient food, to get better accommodation and medical treatment. It is very important. When we work hard and we feel sick, we fall, we faint, and the children get sick. So we need health care. And as we can see, maternal and child maternity rate in Cambodia is still rate. We have lots of problems. They need clothes, they need money for their children's education, they need relaxation. We every week. So to ensure that our health is strong. Therefore, we need to be hand in hand, the workers, the government, the employers, the buyers, and I would also include the consumer, that we all together try to make sure that the wage is living wage, decent wage. We are not going to buy villa or Land Cruiser or Lexus, but just to make them live in dignity. Thank you. If you have any question, please.
thanks to all the colleagues and for your patience to listen to our decision and comments. Now the floor is open for questions. We will try to answer depending also on the intention, capacity, so on.
Hi, my name is Alessia. I'm a reporter for the Cambodia Daily. I've attended all 3 days of the tribunal, and we've heard various numbers tossed around in terms of what the living wage should be or what the minimum wage should be raised to. And I didn't really hear a number spoken by the judges today. I've heard that you say that the living wage should be implemented, and that's what workers should be paid. But I'm just wondering, is there a figure is there a consensus for a figure of what that should be?
As I said, by definition, it's not the job of a tribunal to define technically what should be the level of a wage. That's part, as is part of the contracting capacity of the parties which are involved. First of all, the workers. The tribunal has insisted very much, and has been taken up again by our colleagues, that what matters in the living wage, first of all, is that it is recognized that the definition of living wage itself should be a product of a participation of the workers. Any wage which comes from above, for whatever reason, is at risk to see something which is simply economically justified or sustainable, but which could be really out of the question. If you have a high wage, but then you have a very, very high inflation rate, and then you are not housing, health, and something like that, the wage is voided. You could have. We have said, and the tribunal has very well specified, what the calculation of a living wage should include. You would see as if you say, could you tell me the indicator of the human rights? Human rights is a quality which is comprehensive of many factors. The living wage is what includes all what has been suggested, and I think one of the points of the recommendation is just to work with priority on the real definition. There is one point I was mentioned, because that was a factual proposition which was made based on the petitioner's report and calculations. At the end of more than 4 to 5 years work in different fields, and by applying one way of calculating the living wage, which is the so-called parity purchasing, parity power, if you take a regional approach, you have a inclusion of all the variables confronted with the cost of life in each of the countries where you are applying that. That's one way, which is technically very interesting, which has been validated in some situation, is an object of debate. If you take that now, at least that was now in 2011, the living wage in Cambodia should be around 120 US dollar per month, which is obviously importantly different from what is available, because according to the testimonies, the basic living wage, even if the estimates are somehow variable, and also multinational are claiming, or purchaser or supplier claims to give more than the wage, then it's not true, then you have to control for fixed duration contract. But certainly 120 in practice would be an important advantage with respect to the existing thing. What the other point the tribunal says, and I think that I would like really that that should be one of the messages of the tribunal for looking forward, that the the calculation of these things should be part of a wider process, because that cannot be a kind of occasion for competition. Otherwise somebody was saying, yes, but rural workers gain even less. So the living wage is a method to put the rights of human beings before what are purely economic consideration of sustainability. That's the big problem which is faced everywhere by multinational. And in this sense, I think that the garment industry worker campaign is specifically important, because the garment industry, global industry, is a model of global industry today, where the human beings become dependent variables, something which is there but it could not be there. So that is the point, and certainly I'm sure that the point of recommendation, but I'm sure colleagues will comment, the living wage once is set as not simply a technical problem, but a problem of compliance of the government and all the stakeholders as a measure of their credibility. I think if you say in a constitution that you are defending human dignity and all the points which are very well spelled out, I think that the fact that the constitution with specific article, not as a kind of document, otherwise if you quote the constitution like you quote the living wage, nothing happens. So the constitution made some specific point of recommendation. The living wage is one way of applying the constitution. If the government, together with the international, is not applying the constitution, it is violating its own laws. So the living wage becomes one indicator of the willingness and the capacity and the responsibility for applying the constitutional national law.
Yes, I'd like to also contribute here that first of all, as you are a journalist, I would like to ask you to be clear in the reporting, although one of the tribunal member of a chief just provide his view about or some figure like 120, but please do not say this is the tribunal view, that 120. So if you quote a member. But I also would like to probably read a little bit more what we recommend in the living wage, minimum living wage standard that we have recommended, although I didn't read out, but maybe I should read that. We here recommends that in order to set precise standards and the method of wage calculation, which is called living wage, the following should be considered. That individual household context is first of all, like a number of family. Not every worker has the same number of dependent member. We cannot set one figure to fit all. There is no one size to fit all. So we have to look at what is the number of the household, the dependent household. Who is the dependent of the worker? We have to determine that aspect. And in that determination of dependent, probably it's also good to keep in mind the constitutional provision related to the parental obligation to their children, as well as the duty of the children to their elder parent. Maybe this is a unique situation of Cambodia, that we have this social care for the parent and the children toward the parent. Should we consider some parent as a dependent member, or should receive some kind of assistance from the working children or somehow? But we have to debate and discuss and set it clearly. And also it depends on the locality, the geographical area. The purchasing power is not equal. That's why even in the labor law, the standard of minimum wage should be set based on the geographical area. We cannot say one for all sector, but of course they can establish one minimum wage for one industry. But it should not be a ceiling or a bottom for that. That's what I would like to stress. So we provide the criteria, not a complete but a basic criteria to be considered for determining a minimum wage. And we are not in the capacity to announce any specific number, as there is no sufficient evidence to present to us, and we haven't developed a clear criteria for that. The presentation could not lead us to conclude what should be the specific method and standard for living wage, although we affirm that living wage is the rights of human in Cambodia as well as other.
I would like to add just that the context is very important of the country. You cannot calculate the minimum wage in Cambodia compared to Vietnam. You know, with Vietnam, maybe with I don't know, maybe with $80 you can live a normal, a decent life, but not in Cambodia. Not in Cambodia, because Cambodia everything is expensive, and then we don't have public transport. Very important to calculate that. In Thailand, they have you know, sky train, they have bus. Here we don't have public transport. We don't have security for medical care. In Thailand, you pay one card for 30 baht. You can go to many public hospital and get free medical care. In Cambodia, you have to pay even in the public hospital. So you have to take into consideration that. And then education should be free. It's free in the constitution. But in reality, as the teacher have a very small salary, yet small salary, some teacher has to sell some copy or ask for, you know, contribution, etc. So you have to take into consideration all these. And yesterday, Sunday, there is a good survey from one expert. This is just an example, you see. He said that if you live in Phnom Penh for only one person, the minimum of the minimum, like I said, a decent life, not to be rich, is 131. So maybe you can, I don't know, you can take into consideration many factors. Thank you.
Just to be clear, because I think that will be bad for the and that would be really misleading from the point of view of the Royal Tribunal. If we look for estimates, and that we have learned of the Tribunal, we have to see really the criteria for presenting, calculation and interpreting. So you can't use numbers outside. And that is one of the messages of the Tribunal. If you are really interested in promoting living wage as a human right, you have to take it seriously. Human rights are not numbers of dollars. It is easy, for instance, to say that if you have a living wage calculated for one person, is 1 point. If you have to calculate a living wage for a family, you could go for $120 as another number which has been presented and which is in 2011 another proposition of the Asia floor wage, because per family that would be $281. And that could be more reasonable, because if you have one person working in the family and then you have to have 2 children, something like that, $280 is the minimum, if you like really to educate your children. So the point is really to consider that in any case we cannot rely on pure economic measure. The fact that living wage is a human right is what is important, and that should be considered, and that is part of the recommendation in the round table, whatever concertation group, stakeholder discussion. You should not compare simply numbers, also because, and that is very clear, it has been made abundantly clear during the tribunal from the action, but that is well known internationally everywhere, that economically the living wage is in fact absolutely viable and sustainable. There is no change, dramatic change in any of the profits you could have. The salary today in the overall cost of goods in the international market is so minimum that is offending to the human dignity. The labor cost account for 2.8% of the cost of the retail price of goods, which means that in fact what is done is really, disappearing in the overall supply chain. And in that sense, it's important to see that even if you increase some and even substantially the living wage, you are not changing the profit and the gain. The figures which have been presented during the tribunal in this sense are absolutely amazing. We cannot repeat all of them, but they have been showing that also for Vietnam, as I mentioned before, and the market flourished before, because everything could become more productive if, as it has been said by Professor Boehringer, the situation in the working condition here, because also of all these living wages, is such that even an inspector cannot investigate because the fumes are excessive. It means that the workers who is in the fumes during the day is not working so well. And then the amount of material which could be discarded and lost, or the errors, is very well known. So it's a circle which needs to be broken. There was even a report, which is possibly not represented, but to give the idea that the application in a garment industry in Latin America, the Dominican Republic, you know that Latin America has been, before the Asian situation, the area for the garment industry, for the maquiladora. I was there many times. The situation was absolutely the same. Then they have found that Asia is even cheaper. In one of those situations, the workers organized from the organization, NGOs, trade unions, were able to take up the way of organizing the factory, and they changed so completely while maintaining their market competitiveness that their salary rose, which is very interesting. It's not possibly interesting here because it's not feasible, but it rose to up to $769 per month. And that is something which is profitable even in the market of the United States. That would imply that, for instance, for Cambodia, that would be equal, just to say that the numbers could go, $284, which is near to the family wage with here. So numbers are very good if they are the product, and it was said, of calculations which consider physical factor, cost of food, then inflation, and then the factors which are in fact constituting the human dignity of the workers and of his family.
Yes, my respect to all the judges. Yes, I've been sitting and listening to the presentation of the judges, and I would like to contribute with regards to the situation of Cambodian workers. After listening, you just present violation human rights or suffering, but as a unionist, we would like to have a foundation, yeah. And I think the judges already met the witnesses, yeah. I think you may calculate, yeah, in the Cambodian context, what should the living wage is, yeah. I think there should be in figure, yeah, in the current situation, in the current market, you need to say this amount of wages, to make workers live with dignity. You spend 2 days with today, and you raise only the method of calculation without any estimate on the wage, because we need this number as foundation to push forward, to negotiate for further solution. So I think even though you do not have any authority or power, as you mentioned, this is true, but the judges must identify the figure, saying that this amount is the wages which is considered as living wage and in the current market. But in the future there might be some changes accordingly. And after hearing, I cannot see the real figure, and I do not know what foundation we should utilize for our negotiation. Thank you.
If I may say, that's very sad. I will not repeat what I have said before. I must say from my general experience, not because of the tribunal, I would be very happy if we aired here in Cambodia a free tribunal or world tribunal, which should be only a Cambodian tribunal, confronted with some proposals of different levels of living wages, but not, as you say, which is completely, I don't know, wrong or not. Certainly is completely on the other side of the tribunal. You say that you use the level of wages as a foundation. I was saying that the levels of wages is the results of some foundation which have to do with human rights, and then the consideration of the condition. But if you add different proposals, you say that you are a unionist. We have been asked here because many groups from trade unions are part of the promotion, and if you are able to obtain different estimates with the motivations and the components of this level, then you could say that if your estimates go from 60 to 300, then you could, in case, ask a tribunal based on the constitution of Cambodia to judge whether a 61 salary is a living wage or whether it's better to have a 280 salary based on the Cambodian constitution. That is something which must be done, but once you have the condition for debates and participatory debates with the real workers, because as far as we have heard as a tribunal, that's the only thing we could say, that unionists were looking for affirming the right to good condition or assessing the condition were simply dismissed, losing also the minimum living wage or the minimum wage. That's the situation in Cambodia. We could simply testify for that. We cannot, certainly, that's not our job to sit and judge the internal problem of a country which has a constitution and a labor law, which is the really law should be complied with.
Yes, I would like to talk in Khmer because you asked in Khmer. As I mentioned earlier, that we have 2 days of hearing, but we did not obtain sufficient evidence to make decision. And second, we are not at the position to give any decision on that. In particular, the living wage, the right. Yeah, actually, we have it written in our law, but we do not have clear standard for calculation. Therefore, the judges cannot just estimate or cannot just say exactly, because we only heard from one party and another party could not give any verification. So we could do more discussion technically on the living wage. Therefore, we cannot give the exact figure. But one key point, which is important for the unions, in the tribunal, we say that living wage, is the human right which guaranteed by the law. And second, we also mentioned that the current wage cannot meet the basic needs. In other words, $6 to $1 cannot meet our need. But you ask us to identify the figure. We cannot. But you could use these as the foundation, as the reference to negotiate with the buyers or with the employers. You can say that $61 is not enough. And in the global supply chain, the key actor is the buyer, is the brain. Therefore, we need to work with the employers, work with the government to convince the buyers to share their benefits, and then we can increase. We are able to increase the wages, because as we can see in the presentation, responsibility have been blamed to the employers, to the company. So this is very important. The brands, the buyers try to avoid any responsibility. So we need to mobilize more stakeholders to study on these aspects. To study geographical situation, social situation, to determine living wage. Because our law, actually, we provide priority to geographical sector. So this is the reference to you, which you could use. This is not a tribunal which solves your problem at all.
Hello. My name is Champol. I'm a journalist with Reuters. My question is, how is this tribunal, how likely the government or the factories will listen to this finding? Has over the past finding been successful? Thank you. Do you think that they will listen to your recommendation?
I think governments only listen to what they have to listen to. And so I actually like the last part of the previous speaker's comments. So we're not here to solve your problem. We're here to give you information, knowledge, some international support. But in the end, the government has to be made to listen. And that is the work of the trade unions. And there's lots to be done in this country, apparently, in organizing and unifying the trade union movement. But I wanted also to say that, and this is partly in response to the trade unionists who want to know what our view was of the living wage. Let me say this. We were asked to come here by an organization that has been working for, I think, 6 years to establish two things: the right to a living wage and decent working conditions, and what that wage should be. This is the Asian Floor Wage Campaign, the Alliance. So we were asked to come here as a part of that campaign. Gianni made reference to the report from the Sri Lanka Tribunal. Well, we've had a Sri Lanka tribunal, we're having a Cambodia tribunal, there will be one or two more, and then there will be, I believe, scheduled in a year or two's time, a tribunal in India, an international one, collecting all of this information. And I dare say that internationally, this movement is beginning to have some impact. The point about the Asian Floor Wage Alliance is that it is linking up trade unionists, NGOs, progressive experts, academics, etc., in order that all Asian countries, the whole region, will work together, the progressive people will work together to have this living wage, so that the brands cannot escape to some other country and say, well, Cambodia wants us to pay $130 or $220, which is two of the figures that have been used. We'll go to Bangladesh, or maybe to Africa. That would probably be the next place where they can get cheap labor. So my answer, in a sense, to both of the questioners is organize. Get together with your regional counterparts. Make sure that governments and brands do not pick you off one at a time, which is what they love to do. So, as I said, the government will listen if they're made to listen. Otherwise, they'll be too busy counting their money. Wherever it comes from.
So I would like to add to that. I would like to thank Mr. Rongchun in particular for raising concern. I understand your concern, and I would like, I have the same concern. I would like everything to be clear like you do. Yeah. So this is true and this is correct. But please look at the first recommendation, because maybe we do not have much time to go to much detail. We would like, of course, we would like to have a legal framework in this country, yeah, to explain clearly on right to minimum living wage, and to have a clear standard, what means, what method shall be used for calculation. Yeah. Therefore, I would like to tell that we are not real judges. Therefore, we cannot tell how to do this or do that. No verdicts, no anything. It's only recommendation. Yeah. So the recommendation. Yeah. You, all of you, we, yeah, the government, the workers, the employers, including the buyers, Puma and Adidas, yeah, and I would like the consumers as well, yeah, to come together to discuss, to solve this issue, because without the power of the workers, without the workers, we cannot have the products for sales. And yeah, globally we eliminate slavery, yeah. But if we do not pay attention to their living condition, if I can see in the picture, I believe this is modern slavery. Yeah, we cannot tolerate that, because in this century we need to live. We must live with dignity. Thank you.
Another question. The other question there.
Yes, good morning to the 5 judges, and good morning to all participants. My name is Phu Swan. I am the president of Public Servant Association. I am member of a union. I am member of PSI, and also the president of ASEAN Service Employer Trade Union Council based in Cambodia. According to the observation in the last 3 days, I think this is very important, for Cambodian people, in particular Cambodian workers. But I would request to have a clear mechanism for future implementation, because we could see that this campaign would not be successful in Cambodia unless Cambodia, in particular, workers try hard. Some of them lose their job, some of them lose even their lives to achieve changes. But if we look at international campaign in the United States as example, we can see a real result, because the union in the United States, in the US, submit their petition to the government, just like in Washington D.C. The government officials accepted the petition from the union, the request from the union, and promised that they would establish an act, not allow the American buyers to buy any exploited product, and then they would send this act to other countries. And I would like this happen in Asia, in Cambodia. If we look at the Cambodian context, you can see that most of the business people, they have close connection to the government officials. So I believe that without clear mechanism we cannot achieve.
Another question that possibly to have, because then we have been told that from the organizer we have to close in some minutes.
Yes, my respect all the judges and all participants. My name is Songrat from Tourism Federation, and I have observed in the last 3 days, in particular living wage. I could see that in terms of living wage, our team has been doing a lot, and the government decided to increase the salary. And at the meantime, even though we have an increase of the salary, the wage, however, because of the rising prices, the wage cannot meet all demand, and wages is the responsibility of the employers who employ the workers. And also, as we mentioned, Mr. Dennis mentioned, and one of the judges said that if it is possible to have 120 to improve the life of the workers, but if we increase up to 120, what about if the government does not prevent the inflation? Yeah, inflation. So 120 is still the problem. So the government, should not just say the employers is responsible. The government should be responsible itself. In terms of what Madame Pongchiu mentioned, Madame Galabru mentioned, I think in the recommendation we should include some clauses that the government plays in part in giving health care and well-being and public transportation, which in part to improve the livelihood, improve the living condition of the workers, so that they can obtain a decent life. So with that, I would like you to include what I mentioned in the recommendation in terms of the roles of the government to deliver health services and other public services to ease the issue of the workers. Thank you. First of all, I respect the hearing. Judges, my name is Kek Galabru. I'm from one of the confederation. I have two questions only in terms of living wage. According to the presentation on the first day, we should obtain a living wage and better living working condition. And second, in terms of legal framework, both national and international laws guarantee the rights of the workers in obtaining living wage and good working condition. And third, according to an economic expert, mentioned that a Phnom Penh dweller should spend $141 to live decently. This is a testimony which we saw and could improve the condition of the workers so that we can live decently. I think the current issue is the wage. Because of low wage, our country are still poor. Meaning that when people get low wage, we cannot live. With that, I would like to ask the wage. The amount of wage 120. You mentioned 120 for one worker or for the whole family. This is one thing. Second, if it is for one worker, what about other dependent? Other dependent, how can they live? 120. And is it decent? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for everybody. If the man who was asked before didn't come back, I ask my colleague here if they like just to make point for answer, and then we close.
Yes, with the question from the Tourism Federation, I would like to say that our recommendation is final, but actually we already stress on workers' right as to have human dignity, basic human right, including healthcare, holiday, and the government law already mentioned that. So if you just say the government should give this, give that. The Reuters reporter asked why the government cannot offer to us. So what means should we look for to negotiate? Therefore, sometimes it is not only just the responsibility of the government. We all need to make the government listen. Just like in our opinion, we do not pose the responsibility on the government or on the employers. It's not about the employers' responsibility in the global supply chain. Therefore, we need to look for strategy. We need to let the consumer know, or even the buyers, share the profit. And the second question, I would like to say that 120 is not the recommendation of the tribunal. Is only one estimate from one judge. But 120 is not the number agreed by the tribunal, because and even in the presentation, the case study mentioned, most of the workers say 90 USD. So why we say 120? What about the amount of calorie intake? So these are still questions. Therefore, we cannot make any conclusion at this stage. And even our demand, we never say 90 for individual worker or 2 person or 3 person with that. But our recommendation mentioned that the calculation must consider the member of the household. We need to have this standard. For example, children, parents, other relatives, unemployed husband. So we need to have clear criteria. If we do not have the standard, how can we produce an exact figure? So but please, 120 is not the decision of tribunal. Thank you. Yes, I would like to thank a gentleman from Tourism Federation. Actually, I regret not to include that. Actually, in our recommendation, the first one to the government, second, third, fourth, we try, we to ask the government to establish a pilot project, for example, housing for workers, So I think we should add, that the government should improve public services like public transportation. I think the government can do it, like public transportation, so that people could live better, because we don't have to spend much. I believe a transport fee is very expensive, just like in Vietnam or Thailand. Very cheap bus fare. This is very important what you raise. And even healthcare services, I think this is very important. We need to include. I think we should include that the government should help the workers. The workers by giving free of charge services. I think is it okay? Gentleman from Australia, he mentioned that the government need to listen to us, but we should include, and this is a very good point. And second, this is very difficult. Actually, yesterday we investigated. Yeah, actually, it is not fine of us to decide. It is a technical research, and it is in the Ministry of Planning's website. Yeah, only one person. Yeah, the gentleman mentioned clearly that 141 USD only per person, no dependents, no relatives. So I think this is the government statistic, and we can base on this as our advocacy as a strategy. Yes, thank you. Yes, I also would like to contribute to that. If we look at the whole aspect, you would like the government to listen to us. I know that the government is listening to us. They have many means to listen to us, and they have also many ways to respond to us. Yeah, and not everybody in Cambodia is knowledgeable with macroeconomy. Yeah, so we come from the civil war, and we try hard to improve the situation as civil society we could. Yeah, actually we analyze the legal aspect, and we produce possible recommendation which the government can take. I also have experience that we need to make the government listen. We have the recommendation in place. It doesn't mean that after the recommendation the government would listen, but we from that we can use this recommendation in advocate. I have one example in women in politics. We try to convince the government to promote women in political position. We try to walk from province to province, to convince the government. And everybody here thinks that it is impossible with just a recommendation here. I am not an economist, but I have my own reason. That if we would like to know what activity, what action successful or not, we need to consider. We need to consider all stakeholders. So with that, we can analyze, and we can look for a strategy to achieve. So we here we have discussed. We do not know what pressure the buyer pose on the employers. We do not know. So we feel pity on workers. But we do not know how much we could demand. And if you are near, if you stand by the workers, I think you should tell us what pressure the suppliers pose on the employers, and what employers pose on the workers, so that we can discuss more on that. So this is my contribution. And you always think that we are useless judges. Actually, we have considered based on economic factors, legal factors, and after hearing testimonies before we develop a recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, I certainly agree with what the other members of the panel have been saying. I certainly agree also with our friend from... Can you hear? Okay. I also agree with what our friend said about the government up to a point. Let me tell you a little bit about what happened in Australia. The government was under a lot of pressure for various reasons, but certainly from the multinationals, to keep wages down. So they developed the concept of a social wage. And a social wage is the wage that you don't get, but which you're promised. It might be health care, it might be transportation, it might be some social security benefits. But remember, governments change and they change their mind. Governments can take things away as well as give it to you. And this happens, and this is happening across Europe and in the United States. When economic crisis occurs, the governments always say, well, we all have to tighten our belt. We have to have austerity. We can't be spending a lot of money. And that's code language for we're going to exploit you more. So beware of the government. And I believe I don't have to warn you of that here. But beware of relying on the government. It seems to me that, and I'm not saying don't have the social wage, but let's be realistic. It hasn't happened yet. And I think you're going to have a big struggle in convincing your government that you need free transportation and so forth, the kind of things that you might get in Venezuela or Cuba, but I don't see it happening here. But in any case, yes, go for it. Try to get a social wage. That's fine. But don't take your eye off the ball. I'm a football coach. I love to play the world game. And we always tell our young players, don't take your eye off the ball. The big money, the fantastic amounts of money are with the brands, with the multinationals. That's where the money lies, and that's where the wages need to come from. The other thing, of course, is inflation. If you stopped inflation, then your real wages wouldn't be going backwards as they are today. So one has to ask, perhaps, what can the government do to reduce inflation? Where's the money going? Where is the money being spent? And if I were in another country, I'd say, should the government pay $200 million for a new airplane for its air force, or for a few $100 million for a ship? I don't know where all the money is spent here in Cambodia, but I suspect one job that should be done is an auditing of the unnecessary expenses which the government allows. And of course the last thing is, which has to be related to all of this, is corruption. We've had demonstrations of anti-corruption work in India. There are models around the world and indeed in the Philippines, where I have some knowledge. Corruption rots a society because it pervades. It's all pervasive. It's all over the place. It's in everything that the government does, from my information. And that is not only taking money away from the workers, but it has a very negative impact on the culture of the country. So there are a number of things we need to look at. I would just I would be more questioning of the government rather than asking them to do things for you. Because as I say, they may do it today, but they can take it away tomorrow.
Thank you. I think that we have come to a close. I do not like to add anything to what has been said by my colleague. I will simply remember that for the point of view of my role as President of the Tribunal, please don't try to quote the Tribunal as if we are in favor of one level or the other of the living salaries, of the living wages. That's not our problem. We have said that the real measure of living wage is the life of real people in each country. And the real people in each country, in the tourist or in the garment industry, they are responsible first with the union or organization of define and maintain the level of contractual power which allows them to have this money. Second, I think that is to what Professor Boehringer is saying, the money is with the employer, the buyers. The money is with them. The wage is not with them. The right to the wage is not the privilege of the employer, just the opposite. This is one of the most false statements. Employers are not those who have the power to establish. They have possibly the economic power to try to impose the wage, as that has been underlined here in the verdict or the judgment or the decision of the tribunal, is a human right. It's something which has to do with the right of people, and that's not, life is not the property of any employer. If we try to imagine these contractual fights like in Italy, we are with the longest possible tradition of right of workers, and with the crisis they are just, as Professor Boehringer was saying, cancelling out one day from another. We have the fixed duration contracts now, and like here, because of economic crisis. And the point is that in fact we have to re-establish the value of the Italian constitution, which enshrines the international law principle. So the problem is always there, and we cannot, in the fragmentation of work we have in Italy, there is no industry which is concentrating 80% of the export. Just the opposite. We have fear possibly with exporting, and they say going to the US in order to build with public money, not with private money, a new way of production. So we are in a very complex world. What is important about the principle that the decision on wage has to do with right and fundamental right. Then we have certainly, obviously, to struggle and to fight. Last point, I think all of us have agreed, and the point, we are, and our decisions are not by definition binding. We could say that even now international tribunals do not pronounce decisions which are binding. However, our decisions are not binding. Human rights are binding. The fact that we affirm that wages are human rights is something which is binding for everybody, and first of all with all those who have to see that as a strength to go on, and I think that is our wish and the reason why we have been here during these days to work on the tribunal. Thanks a lot.